and welcome to This is USG, a video podcast by the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Khademian, Executive Director of the universities at Shady Grove. On November 5th, in a beautiful outdoor ceremony, President Bruce Jarrell was inaugurated as the 7th president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore. President Jarrell built a remarkable and impactful career at UMB, beginning with his appointment as chair of the University of Maryland's School of Medicine's Department of Surgery in 1997. He then served as chief academic and research officer and senior vice president in 2012, and executive vice president and provost beginning in 2017. In addition to the educational, research, and outreach impact UMB has made in Baltimore and the state as an anchor institution, UMB has made significant investments at USG in Montgomery County in thriving programs for nursing, pharmacy, social work, and dentistry. And these vital programs continue to grow in importance for the workforce priorities of the region and the state. We have an opportunity to talk with Dr. Jarrell today about his career, the major role that UMB has played during the pandemic, and the future of USG. Dr. Jarrell, Bruce, it is an honor to welcome you to This is USG.
Thank you, Ann. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You have such a fascinating journey to the presidency, starting out on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I know during the inauguration, you made a very special announcement about the $18 million gift to UMB for scholarships for students from the Eastern Shore, emphasizing healthcare on the Eastern Shore, and also cancer research. Clearly an inspirational place for you and your dear friend who also made the gift as well. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about growing up on the Eastern Shore and how that experience has informed some of your journey into medicine and into academic leadership.
Well, thank you, Ann, and I'd be pleased to do that. It was a little bit of a different place, and I think it still is a little bit of a different place. That is the Eastern Shore. We grew up in the mid-shore area, had a farm and a small canning factory, and it was hard work pretty much throughout the year. And yet my parents both had been to college and both accentuated the importance of education. So even though we worked hard, and we worked hard with our hands, we worked hard with our heads as well. And so my brothers and sister, all of us went to college, and some of us passed college. So it was in part that. It was also in part that we were part of the public school system. And I don't know what the attitude about public schools are today. It's hard to figure that out. But I know back then, as far as I was concerned, it was an excellent education. There were great role models. I learned a lot from my teachers, and many of them still remain in my mind as clear as the day when they taught me. So it was just a good experience with a lot of emphasis on education. In spite of that emphasis, not a lot of the classmates of mine went to college. Many of them had to work, either continue on the farm or follow other careers. So it was tough from the point of view of what do you do after high school? And so many stayed on with their family or whatever their job. But we managed to do something a little bit differently. So that was good.
Yeah, it's a great story and great personal journey as well. You know, when you're asked to talk about the University of Maryland, Baltimore, you know, it's a nationally renowned university, especially now coming all of the impact that the university had on managing and responding to the pandemic, from research to public health guidance to your own role as a leader and as a very public voice in how to navigate this crisis. You know, just the ability of the university to step up at a time like this in such an impactful and really flexible, phenomenal way. You know, what is it about the University of Maryland, Baltimore, that makes it so special? If you're asked to highlight, you know, its ability to respond as it did during the pandemic, but more importantly, its ability to be an anchor institution and have such an impact on the city and the region. How do you respond to that? What stands out for you as unique and special about this university?
There's a lot of answers to that one, Anne, and I'll try a few, but I may leave a few out as well. I think first and foremost, every one of the professional schools up here is committed to helping people. That's why we exist. Now, that's not to say that at other universities that doesn't exist. It is to say at this university that is so fundamental to our being that the first thought I have when I'm presented with a problem is what effect is this going to have on the health of people, the well-being of people? And I'm not alone in that thought. This place is full of passionate people whose first thought is, what about the people? And if you're a social worker, it's what about the impact of COVID on the social fabric of Baltimore? If you're a physician, it's how do I keep people alive and healthy? And everywhere in between is how UMB responds. So I think all of us are in this world because we're service oriented, service to the health and well-being. And that's not just a slogan, that's reality here. During the pandemic, there were many physicians and nurses and med techs and people who put in unbelievable hours at great hardship, at great risk to their families, because that's why we're here. I don't know whether you remember polio. I remember when polio came out and that vaccine came out. And there were a lot of people who took care of those patients in spite of personal risk. And I think COVID was exactly the same thing. Personal risk is secondary and taking care of people is primary. So passion is part of the answer. Part of the answer, though, is also a deep commitment to Maryland. And you may recall when I talked about that at my inauguration, I think the people here believe very deeply in the state of Maryland and what it's done in terms of public health, in terms of support of higher education. And this is a payback. This is really important to us that the state know just how committed we are to that part of our mission as well. That's leaving out a lot of other pieces, education being one of them. But I think commitment to the people of the state is really something that drives me personally very hard. And I think that goes back to the Eastern Shore, where the state was really important over there in terms of being part of a dynamic state. Until they built that bridge, of course. But that may be before your time, but there was a time.
Well, I know you came to University of Maryland, Baltimore initially to chair the Department of Surgery at the medical school there, and I believe you were at Arizona before that.
Was.
So I'm wondering, what drew you from the warm weather, back at. I'm guessing it had a lot to do with your dedication to service and your dedication to the state of Maryland as well. But talk a little about that decision to come back to Maryland, and what drew you, and what was your vision at the time when you came there to chair that department? What was it that you were hoping to accomplish when you came back to UMB and were made the chair of this really important department?
Well, I think the first way I would answer that is that the Dean of Medicine at the time here, Donald Wilson, was somebody that I wanted to learn from. And so as a general answer to your question, I only move when I'm moving to work with someone who I can learn a lot from. And he was someone whom I thought I could learn a lot from. And so I was willing to make that move. And it was a big move for me.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that I really had hoped to do, beside having a good department, was to build a research program that was related to surgical disease. And that was hard to do in Tucson. It looked like to me I could do that here at Maryland a lot better. And I remember meeting with the hospital CEO at the time, and his vision caught me a little off guard in that it was clear he wanted to be the best in the country. And I kind of thought that was nice because I hadn't heard other people say that at other institutions. It was, I want to be good, I want to be whatever, but best in the country. That's a pretty bold statement. So That was the kind of thing that drew me here, that kind of leadership and the opportunity to learn a lot.
I hear pretty bold visions from you as well. That's really interesting. I think you have a very inspiring vision for the university and for the system. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've built on from that experience, the importance of sharing a vision, the importance of sharing your aspirations.
Well, it's kind of you to say that. I always thought I was a little reserved on those things because I like to keep it simple, to be honest with you. And to me, if there are, for me, the vision actually is if I can educate students the best possible way I can, if I can make discoveries that change the way we practice medicine or law or social work, if I can deliver a better product, that's actually my vision. And so that's what I work hard to do. And I think there's many ways to get at that. I don't think there's one prescription for that. I think that there are many ways to get it. Shady Grove happens to be one of those, as a matter of fact. But to me, it's how many ways can you really become excellent? And I think here, that was one of the things that was always attractive to me, a lot of ways.
I like that a lot. How many ways can you become excellent? There's
Yes.
lots of paths to excellence. I like that a lot. That's really insightful. Well, let's talk about Shady Grove. We have four of the schools represented here in nursing, which is growing like crazy. The pharmacy program also, the School of Social Work, and the School of Dentistry. And the School of Dentistry has this wonderful clinic here that's open to the public here at Shady Grove. Tell a little bit about how you see these programs at Shady Grove. What role does the Shady Grove component play in the broader vision of UMB? How do you see the programs here kind of adding on to expanding or growing the mission of UMB?
Yeah, that's a long answer, Ann. And the way I would start to answer it was that really, when I left the medical school to come over to the campus with now Chancellor Perman, one of the things that I got to see was how the other universities function. Because of course, you may not think it this way, but medical schools are very cloistered. We kind of live within our own sphere and do our own thing. And we don't really know about football or fraternities or those kinds of things. You're very cloistered. And when I got over here to campus, I began to learn about other parts of higher education, which was, again, something I thought was important. And Shady Grove to me was an immediately interesting topic because it was a different model, almost an experiment, if you will. And it wasn't a university in itself, and yet there were many universities committed to the idea. I really liked the idea. And as I learned more about it, the more I thought that had tremendous potential to have an impact. And I believe it does have an impact. In terms of the development of UMB at Shady Grove, there's always a caveat I have to give, and that's called accreditation. And accreditation in the health professions, social work, and law is a special accreditation in that the rules are very strict. And when you have satellites, if I can call it that kind of campus, the rules are very different for us. And so with the caveat that we have to maintain our accreditation, the opportunities there were tremendous. And for example, the nursing school, they have more than doubled their footprint out at Shady Grove in the last 8 or so years. And I believe that's in response to a local need at Shady Grove, but also a statewide need in nursing. And so it gives us the ability to develop capacity that we would not be able to do at the home campus. For us to expand our nursing school here by double would create tremendous space constraints, et cetera. So I think having all of the professional schools that are there down there, to me, makes tremendous sense. And there may be a day when the other schools are there as well. Obviously, that's not a promise. That's simply one never knows what the future will bring. But in any direction that we expand down there, obviously it's got to be done in a way that benefits the county, the local community, as well as USG and UMB. I mean, these things don't happen on thin air. They happen on support, and they also happen on faculty commitment. And faculty commitment, to me, I think is important at Shady Grove, and something that you and I have talked about before, and I think will need to be addressed more in the future.
Yeah. The pharmacy program, the new cannabis program, for example, that pharmacy has introduced is growing very rapidly. A very creative program that's drawing a lot of interdisciplinary interest as well. And all four of those programs are committed to interprofessional education. They're all committed to the experience of someone studying to be a social worker, to understand oral health, or to understand some aspects of nursing, or to understand some aspects of social work. And I think that this has real promise and potential for the future, a more holistic way of training students. What do you think about interprofessional training? And is that something that is more of kind of an experiment or a pilot here on campus, or is that something that is more broadly happening in all of the professional schools at UMB and across the profession more generally, this interprofessional education?
It's a much broader phenomenon, and I always have to back up by reminding myself that I'm what's known as a transplant surgeon. And when in the early days of transplantation, for example, for kidney, it was absolutely interdisciplinary care and interdisciplinary education, because these were complicated patients and no one individual could come close to knowing what was necessary for the particular patient. So I've got very strong, long, deep roots in that area. It's gotten a better name now, and it's got IPE now. It has and it also, I think, has gotten more mainstream for all of the professional schools. I think that's a good thing. And I would always emphasize IPE, but the surgeon in me would first and foremost say, but wait a minute, I got to be competent in my own profession first. So IPE isn't the driver, it's a secondary benefit to patients to give better care. So again, getting back to accreditation, when you put a dental school program down there, the dentists first and foremost have to know the technical parts of dentistry, and then they need to know, and where does social work come into this picture, and where does law come into this picture, et cetera. And so I think we've done that pretty well here at UMB, but competence first, interdisciplinary to follow that is the way I would put them.
That's a great strategy and a great way of approaching it. And you can see that here, the master's degree that is in dental hygiene, but it's a leadership degree. So it's after you developed your competence, right, then you can develop this broader leadership perspective that allows you to be more transdisciplinary or to take on different aspects. So
do better care. That's better care.
Exactly.
Okay. No doubt about it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's great. I want to, at some point, I want to come back to this interdisciplinary, because I want to talk about metalsmithing. But let's first talk about research and IBBR. We have this amazing institute here on the campus, the Institute for Biotechnology and Bioscience Research, and the partnership between UMB and College Park is a very strong one, especially around the Empower funds that are a focus there. And I heard you speak recently about the success of that program, how it was difficult to get it off the ground and to get that partnership going, but there's been some great success associated with that. Tell us a little bit about how UMB sees the role of IBBR in the work that you're doing at UMB and the research mission of UMB, and particularly how it relates to your role in Montgomery County as well.
Right. So IBBR, So when you think of UMB and College Park, you should think that there are one universities, Research One universities, which is few and far between, public universities. College Park is a more physical sciences university, meaning physics, chemistry. UMB is more of a biological sciences and social sciences campus. So when you think of IBBR, the way you should think of that in your head is that it's an amalgamation of the physical sciences and the biological sciences. Of course, that's what's Empower. That's what Empower was meant to accomplish as well, to make greater what each of us can do apart, make it greater if we do it together. I didn't say that very well, but we're combining forces in areas that neither of us could accomplish by ourselves. And IBBR is really a perfect example of that. IBBR, for example, we've invested a lot of money in what I would call molecular imaging. So believe it or not, and I never thought this day would come, the imaging technology at IBBR is almost able to see a single atom. So when you think about the precision and the questions that allows you to answer, suddenly the world opens up. And so IBBR is full of not only this technology, but also individuals who have expertise in the area. That technology can go in many directions. Among them, development of vaccines, among them, development of new drugs, among them, learning about how a particular mechanism in the body works so that you can design a drug to interfere with that mechanism if it's pathologic. So IBBR has this tremendous, strong underpinning of science that combines the strength of College Park and UMB. What the trick here is how do you get faculty who are deep scientists to stake their claim in their career at IBBR, develop a career path so that they have the opportunity to be promoted, to become tenured, and to make important scientific discoveries in that location. And if you do that, you will now be adding great expertise to Montgomery County, to Shady Grove, to all of the components, because that always has not only a scientific component to it, but an educational component. Absolutely. So when I see the future of IBBR, I see it in a somewhat bifurcated manner. It has to be excellent scientifically first, but now that it is excellent scientifically, how does it become excellent from an education point of view? And I don't mean just graduate students getting their PhD. I mean students perhaps getting a master's degree whose expertise would complement the I-270 biotech corridor, whatever that means. And that means a broad range of things. So to me, I see a number of master's degrees spawning out of that relationship, and hence the future of the Montgomery County educational effort, if I can call it that.
Yeah, we're very excited about that possibility as well. Growing graduate programs here, master's programs, and even creating perhaps opportunities for a highly structured undergraduate research experience as well, to the extent that that's possible as well. It gives students a hands-on research, experiential learning opportunity, great research skills, which are highly needed in the, as you say, the I-270 corridor as well. So we're excited about that too.
I agree with you on the undergraduates. I think it's critical to expose them to science, and this is real science. Okay, it's real science in that it's funded and that it's with state-of-the-art technology. So nothing would give me greater pleasure than to have a student in Montgomery County who was going to go into one thing, but suddenly saw the beauty of this deep science and going into that and becoming a world expert in it. That's success.
Yeah. David Weber, who is the co-director there at IBBR, who's a medical professor from UMB's medical school. He's very interested in team science and growing team science there, very much, I think, along the lines of how you described being a transplant surgeon. You know, a lot of these problems are you need a holistic kind of approach to some of these problems. And so lots of competent people, but working together as a team to solve some of these things.
Yeah,
I think
David's a team player.
Mhm.
And you haven't mentioned the National Institutes of Standard and Technology
Yes, yeah,
that's a partner there. And that's been a long-standing partnership. And it adds a whole nother dimension to the educational possibilities in addition to the scientific possibilities.
absolutely. Very exciting. So, well, let me just ask you a little bit about the future Shady Grove, and where this may be an unfair question, but but we're in the midst of our strategic planning process. We've been planning now for about 6 months, and it's been a very comprehensive, very broadly inclusive process. So a lot of our partners, and in fact, I'm going to be sharing some of the results of this with all of you at one of these upcoming meetings as well. But if you could give us some advice on things that Shady Grove should be focused on for the future, and what are some of the ways that we can, maybe it's how we can better support our partners, or a more integral role that we can play. If there was some advice that you could give us in the strategic planning process, or insight that you might offer us from your many years of engaging with USG, what kind of advice or guidance might you give us in this process?
I think a couple of things. And maybe the most important is that this goes for IBBR as well as for Shady Grove. The more faculty that you have there who have a commitment to that institution, who have a career path at that institution, who have the ability to be promoted, maybe even tenured, okay, at that institution, that gives them an opportunity to develop their career that they have at UMB or College Park. You need to be competitive in that market as well, because the way you will get top drawer educators, top drawer scientists, top drawer leaders like yourself is to have that pathway for one's career. There was this old saying in surgery that there was a thing called itinerant surgery, and that is that you would travel 30 or 40 miles, do a case, and then go back home. And I guess you can figure out what quality of surgery that is, because if there's a complication, where's my surgeon? Okay, yeah. And I think the same thing applies here. The more faculty you have whose commitment is to Shady Grove, the stronger you're going to get. And I think nursing is a great example of that. Look out, because you're going to have real faculty, not that other faculty aren't real, but you're going to have a real faculty presence as a unit there, which I think will help you transform your institution in terms of its scope of care, of education, et cetera. So I think that's one thing, the physical presence. But the second thing is it costs each of us a lot of money to put a program down there. And I hate to be bringing up money, but it's got to be financially viable in the long run to be able to do this. And I know you know this, for us to duplicate a dental school program down there costs a lot of money. And think about how much you spent to create all that dental clinic, a lot of money. And so it's got to be funded properly in a sustainable manner. It will never be self-sufficient. In fact, this may surprise you, but I don't think any of our schools are truly self-sufficient. I know none of our research is self-sustaining. It always costs us money to do programs. And so I would say you ought to have the same knowledge about things at Shady Grove. That is, that you can't get it just on tuition. It won't work down there if it's duplicating a program up in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think those are two great insights, having people present and committed and building their careers here, and also the investment that it takes here as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I remember the discussion about if I'm a faculty member and I pay for parking in Baltimore, why do I have to pay for parking at Shady Grove? And I mean, those are the kinds of issues that just say, well, why do I want to go to Shady Grove? So, getting a faculty that's committed to the geographic campus, I think will be a great step forward. Yeah. It's becoming a great step forward.
I agree. I wonder if we could go back a little bit to the pandemic, and both Chancellor Perman and yourself as physicians, you both played such a key role in guiding the universities and the system in how to navigate this pandemic. And University System of Maryland was one of the first, if not the first, system to say, we're going to have a vaccine mandate. We're going to do that. And I wonder if you could take us a little bit into some of that experience in the early days when there were lots of hard decisions to make, and making them not only as individual universities, but as a system. And what was that like? I mean, it must have been we were all quite terrified of this pandemic and really uncertain. We didn't have a lot of good information. We were desperately relying on what we could know, and that was coming from medical schools and from the professionals. Tell us a little bit about that decision process to get to a vaccine mandate, and the role that UMB played in that process as well.
Yeah, I would say to you, it wasn't just about a vaccine mandate. It was really from soup to nuts, because early in March, the data gathering was very intense to learn what we could learn. And I think part of what I would say to you is that we had the good fortune of having the Center for Vaccine Development. Center for Vaccine Development is a center in the School of Medicine, vaccine development, obviously, and not only deep expertise in all aspects of vaccine development, but the individuals who were leaders there were on the CDC and the FDA and the WHO and the White House and the state of Maryland, all of those advisory boards. And so we really had wonderful access to the most up-to-date thinking that one could ever have. And I just don't underestimate the value of that, having a simple discussion with the director of CVD, Kathy Newsel, to say, hey, Kathy, where's this heading? And what do you know about this vaccine? And how safe do you think it is? What are the data, as opposed to relying on what got published or what was in the New York Times or whatever? We could get, I think, really from the horse's mouth information about what was going on. To me, that was probably the most valuable thing, because the vaccine, remember, was actually remarkable was 10 months later. Yeah. Now in the world of past, 5 years ago, having a vaccine in 4 years would have been remarkable. Having a vaccine in 10 months is just astronomical, as far as I can see, in terms of, at least from an EUA. So there were a couple of very key elements that preceded this mandate. One of them was simply to set up a lab to do PCR testing. Yeah. And UMB took a basic research lab and inverted it into a clinical lab with great difficulty. I mean, this was not a simple feat, and yet almost every PCR test done at the USM institutions was done at UMB. That was a remarkable accomplishment, and it took a lot of bravado to make that happen. So that was certainly one thing, and mandating testing was, to me, one of the most important things to do. So I would have put that probably first on the list of mandates. I think in terms of the vaccine mandate, Ann, this vaccine is remarkable. This virus is remarkable in terms of its unpredictability, and yet this vaccine has been remarkable in terms of its protection capability and in terms of its safety record. So in spite of all of what we're calling hesitancy in this country, the vaccine is remarkable. And I think saying to students whom we had the authority to do, you need to come here with a vaccine, I don't know that it was such a difficult decision. I think the chancellor led the way, but he had a lot of science, a lot of scientific expertise standing behind him saying, you won't regret this. this is the right thing to do. So to me, it was a you talked about IPE, it was a team sport, okay, because we had all this expertise here.
Yeah, there was always something so reassuring. We would have the chancellor calls, which I came into midway through because I didn't come on board until October of 2020, but those calls were always so reassuring. Sometimes we didn't know, but there was just a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight, a lot of, here's what we know, and here's what we can count on. And you left those calls feeling informed and having, some good premise to make good decisions on. So I think that those calls also were really good team science as well in some ways.
I think that's right. And there was a lot of work behind the scenes in preparing often for these things. The other thing that I would say to you that perhaps goes a little unnoticed, but I think was very reassuring, is that when anytime somebody had a question, all they had to do was pick up the phone and call somebody, and either I or Wilbur Chen or Kathy or Dave Marcosi would be there to say, well, here's what our current thinking is, but stay tuned because it's not a fixed point in time. The other major player in this, which was not always seen, was the medical center. And the leadership in the medical center was superb on this. And UMB and the medical center operated as one. And I literally mean that. We harmonized our policies, our practices, our announcements and everything to be on the same page. And being on the same page was really important so that people didn't get mixed messages, confusing messages. They said this and you said that. It allowed things to be very harmonized. And I think that was a strength that perhaps wasn't emphasized, but yet was critical to our strength in this, I think.
And a tribute to the kind of strong relationships that you have built as well. I think that, clearly there were strong, good relationships through all of that good coordination as well.
Well, thank you for that. But that's important to me that UMB is not seen as this outsider, but rather seen as very much a member of the system and a partner and collaborator with all the universities. I really view that as fundamental to my existence here.
That's wonderful. I'm going to ask you one more question to wrap it up here, and that is about your talent as a metalsmith and your membership in a blacksmith association as well. I know that you've this wonderful video that was highlighted as part of your inauguration shows you, working away in the fire with this amazing. There we go. Tell us about how this came to be. How did you discover this art form, and why do you do it? What is it? What is it that it does for you?
Well, as from a general principle point of view, I'm a firm believer in work-life. What do you call it? Work-life balance.
Work-life balance.
Okay, I'm a firm believer in that, and I honestly believe that when you take time away and do something different, you come back with a much better mind. And I've just seen that happen over and over again. So to me, it's not just for pleasure, it's a benefit in terms of performing your job that you take time away to do something totally different. Growing up on a farm with a small business, I did a lot of metalworking to repair things, but I never got into blacksmithing. And I then actually did the equivalent of an apprenticeship with a woodworker. So I did cabinet making for 30 years and loved it, but you couldn't bend wood the way you could bend metal. So to me, metal is this wonderful, malleable material that lets you sort of create very delicate things. So to me, it's just like surgery from a certain point of view. You can do very, very precise, delicate things. And in the end, you see a pleasing result. And so that's why I enjoy it. And I enjoy it because there's a younger generation where this all has been forgotten. And you need to keep crafts like this alive. They're really important to humanity, in my thinking. So I love it. I love doing metalworking. It's not horseshoeing. Thanks for saying that. We're not-
No, it's beautiful what you've done, and I agree with that work-life balance. I think it's so important to be able to shift your mindset and do something different with your hands, something physical, and take your mind off other things. So, and I can imagine how important it has been for you, especially through the pandemic and all
Oh,
of the
yeah.
challenges that has posed. So,
Yeah.
well, President Jarrell, Bruce, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a delight to talk with you and a real honor as well.
Well, thank you for having me on, Ann. I usually am the host for these things in UMB, so it feels good to be on the other end of it.
Well,
Learning experience.
it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Bruce.